Morning. Morning, everyone. My name is Will Nichols. And actually, in my family, we have a tradition that the firstborn son takes the middle name, takes the father's first name as a middle name. So I'd like to actually start over. Hello, everybody. Good morning. My name is William Richard Nichols, and I'm here today to talk about my father. Now, my father is more than a father to me. He's my best friend. He's my mentor. And most weeks, he's the only person I talk to more than once. But I'd like to tell you about how he shaped my early curiosity in the sciences and how he focused that into my path now for an engineering degree. And also how he taught me a very important life lesson. So let's travel back to when I was a child. My father taught me the value of knowledge early on. In fact, one of my earliest memories is when Pops, I used to call my father Pops, when he used to show me flashcards much like this. And my job was to guesstimate how many objects were on the flashcard and then tell him that. And my scores were weighted against the time it took me to do so. Unknown to me, those tests are actually the same tests that they gave to test IQ when getting into an accelerated program early on in school. So I can actually attribute my being eligible for the gifted program to my father's early tests with me. His teachings did not just end with test proctoring, however. They began becoming more tangible. My father has a PhD in chemistry from Berkeley. And as such, he very quickly became the scientific mentor for our Cub Scouts. Now, the Cub Scouts, for those of you who are born out of the country, are a offshoot of the Boy Scouts. They're for a younger generation, typically between ages 7 and 10. So one of my memories of him doing experiments with us is he built a baking soda volcano on a very large scale. I remember it being the size of a golf cart. He tells me it was the size of the kitchen table. So he also helped us make GAC, and GAC was a pliable, slimy Play-Doh substitute. And we did this by combining household objects like borax, Elmer's glue, and water. So those are a few examples of the tangible experiments he did with me in his early development of my curiosity. And I'd like to tell you about how he focused that into my pursuit of an engineering degree. So for the aforementioned Cub Scouts, we actually participated in the Pinewood Derby. And in order to dispel any confusion, I actually brought an example of that car, because some people might think it's the downhill derby. And this is a Pinewood Derby car. And the idea is that it travels down a track, a gravity curve, and races the other kids' cars. So, and just a side note, my father also decided that he had to bring up the trophy that we won as well. So I'll display that. But my father still covets it. He keeps it in his basement. So I designed this car when I was age 8, and my father's philosophy was to allow me full design freedom. So he would not interject at all. But unfortunately, it was his duty, or fortunately, it was his duty to help me make that design a reality, because 8-year-olds and table saws do not usually mix. But who cares about a piece of wood on 4 wheels when you're 15 years old, right? Our next project was to be a little bit more ambitious. We constructed a P-51D Mustang, not to be confused with the car, the American World War II fighter plane. And we did so out of balsa wood and plastic, no thicker than a note card. And the plane flew once, but it flew. So now I've told you a little bit about how my father helped me focus my interest towards an engineering degree, and also about how he taught me early on to be curious in the sciences. But now it's time to get a little bit more personal, because the most recent thing my father has taught me was how to forgive. The most important lessons you can learn in life aren't taught on chalkboards. They're experienced. And shortly leading up to and shortly after my mother's passing, I developed a serious problem with alcohol. And to kind of put things in perspective, I was homeless. I was sleeping on strange people's couches with my dog, and I had no money. My father went ahead and set up the apartment that I live in today for me. He helped me. He paid for my rehab, which without health care is not a cheap affair. It was later on suggested during my recovery process that I go to my father and I tell him the wrongs I'd done him in the spirit of honesty. So I approached him, only 1 year sober, and I began telling him about the quarters I'd stolen off of his countertop or his dresser when I was only around 14, 15 years old in order to buy cigarettes. And I ended up somewhere around the time that we had settled the estate. See, I was named the co-executor with my father for my mother's estate, and there was no co about it. So now this is actually the important part. After I'd mentioned all these things to him, I asked him what wrong I had forgotten. And he brought up a time when I went to Temple University and I had withdrawn from a class and lied to him about it. And just to put things in perspective, a credit at Temple University is about $500. So this class would be $1,500, $2,000. So the important thing to him wasn't so much the money, it was the fact that I was dishonest. And it was at that point that I realized that as long as I was honest with my father, he would always be there to support me. I then asked him, Pops, what can I do for you to make this right? And he said, son, just don't drink and get your degree. And that is the reason I'm in this room today. So how many of us would have asked for compensation? How many of us would have thought of a harsher punishment? And my father only sought to forgive, to do unto others as he would want done to him, and move on. So, in summary, I've told you about how my father shaped my early interest in the sciences, also about how he focused that interest towards an engineering degree, and how he taught me an important life lesson of forgiveness. I'm completely confident that without my father's support, I would not be standing here in this room today. So I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to talk about my father as a parent, as a friend, and as a mentor, instead of as Dr. Nichols. So thank you, Pops, and thank you all.